In the grim summer of 1945, at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, a scene unfolded that utterly defied every wartime narrative.
For Japanese prisoners of war, just 6 weeks after their capture on Okinawa, the reality of American detainment shattered their ingrained perceptions. Lieutenant Akiko Yamada, an intelligence officer, and Nurse Sachiko Tanaka found themselves not in the harsh confinement promised by imperial propaganda, but amidst facilities exceeding their own military standards and an almost bewildering abundance of food. Yet, it was a particular spectacle, a colossal outdoor culinary event that truly began to unravel their understanding of the enemy. From their barracks window, they observed American guards orchestrating a feast of staggering proportions, massive metal grills, a sight almost alien in their scale, groaned under an astonishing quantity of raw meat, a supply so vast it could provision an entire regiment of the Imperial Army. For women who had endured years of severe wartime rationing and famine in Japan, this display was almost indecent in its plenty, as plumes of rich, smoky aroma drifted towards them, an odor profoundly distinct from any traditional Japanese grilling method. Akiko, however, the analyst, recognized this was no casual meal, but a deeply embedded cultural practice. In Japan, our grilling is delicate, Sachiko murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief. Small charcoal braziers, thinly sliced fish or vegetables. Meat is a rarity. This looks utterly savage. The word hung heavy, perfectly echoing years of Japanese propaganda that painted American culture as crude and excessive. Yet Akiko's intelligence training forced her to see beyond the initial shock. The American soldiers moved with a practiced, almost ritualistic efficiency, suggesting not primitive barbarism, but a deeply ingrained tradition. Was this truly savage, or simply a sophistication they were utterly unprepared to comprehend? Before we delve into how this unexpected barbecue would fundamentally alter their worldview, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. What is the most unexpected cultural lesson you've ever learned? Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. July 1945. Lieutenant Akiko Yamada gazed out the barracks window, her attention drawn to American gods, orchestrating what appeared to be an elaborate outdoor culinary event. Massive metal grills were being positioned in the recreation area, laden with an astonishing quantity of raw meat, more than Akiko had witnessed in years. "What are they doing?" inquired Nurse Sachiko Tanaka. "Join in, Akiko." Having been prisoners of war for 6 weeks since their capture on Okinawa, both women had begun to reconcile with the unexpected realities of American detention. Comfortable facilities, abundant food, and treatment starkly at odds with every warning disseminated by Japanese military propaganda. "I believe they are preparing food outdoors," Akiko replied, her analytical precision, honed during her years as an effective intelligence officer, scrutinizing the scene. "But the scale is immense, enough meat to provision an entire regiment of the Imperial Army." Through the window, they observed Sergeant Davis demonstrating the grill setup to other American personnel, gesturing expressively as charcoal began to glow with intense heat, releasing plumes of smoke into the summer air. The aroma drifting towards the barracks was unlike anything Akiko had ever experienced. A deep, smoky, and savory scent, profoundly different from any Japanese grilling method. "In Japan," Sachiko murmured, "we grill fish and vegetables over small charcoal braziers. Meat is a rarity, and even when prepared, we quickly sear thin slices. This looks ... savage." The word lingered between them. Savage. It aligned perfectly with the depiction of American culture in Japanese propaganda. Crude, excessive, and devoid of the refined aesthetics that define Japanese cuisine. Yet, the Americans preparing this outdoor feast moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting a deeply ingrained tradition rather than a primitive, impromptu act. Their reflections were soon interrupted. "Ladies," Corporal Mitchell called from the doorway, carefully enunciating in her nascent Japanese, "you are invited to an American barbecue celebration. An Independence Day tradition. Food will be ready in 2 hours." "Barbecue," Akiko repeated, trying the unfamiliar English word. "What is this outdoor cooking method?" Michid explained, seamlessly switching to English when her Japanese vocabulary proved insufficient. We smoke meat slowly over low heat. It's a very traditional American celebratory food. After Mitchell departed, the Japanese women huddled, discussing this latest unexpected facet of American culture. The camp housed 43 female posts, nurses, communications specialists, and intelligence personnel captured during the final defense of Okinawa. Most had anticipated execution or harsh imprisonment. Instead, they found themselves in facilities that exceeded Japanese military standards. "Should we attend?" Sachiko asked the assembled group. "This barbecue ritual, we should observe American customs." Akiko decided, her former rank still lending authority among the prisoners. "Understanding our captors will aid us in navigating our imprisonment." However, as the afternoon progressed, the increasingly potent aroma of smoked meat began to override Akiko's pragmatic reasoning, replaced by a profound and undeniable hunger. Japan had endured years of famine, with meat rations being extremely stringent. Most civilians had not tasted beef or pork since the war's commencement. Now, the sheer volume of meat being prepared by the American guards seemed almost indecent in its abundance. Sachiko quietly posed a deeply personal question to Lieutenant Yamada. "Is it wrong to crave food cooked by the enemy?" Akiko found herself speechless. She had sworn allegiance to Japan until death, believing capture to be a source of indelible shame. 6 weeks of American treatment had challenged every one of her assumptions about the enemy's character and intentions. If the Americans could be so generous with housing and medical care, might they also extend generosity through this lavish outdoor feast? As sunset drew near and the barbecue preparations neared completion, Akiko made her definitive choice. "We will go," she announced to the gathered posts. "We will observe this American tradition and endeavor to understand those who defeated us." What awaited them at the American barbecue would not only challenge their assumptions about enemy cuisine, but also fundamentally alter their understanding of food, culture, and a society capable of such prosperity, even in wartime. The recreation area had been transformed into a festive grounds. Long tables, adorned with checkered tablecloths, overflowed with an array of dishes Akiko couldn't name. 5 grills, she counted, continuously emitted plumes of smoke, carrying the complex aromas of wood, charcoal, and seasoned meat. "Welcome, ladies." Sergeant Davis greeted them in English, gesturing towards the food display. "Today, we're celebrating American Independence Day. With traditional barbecue, please grab a plate and try everything." The Japanese posts approached cautiously, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension as they encountered these unfamiliar customs. Akiko's gaze lingered on the grills, where thick cuts of meat, beef, short ribs, pork shoulders, chicken pieces were slowly cooking over the glowing embers. This method bore no resemblance to Japanese yakitori, It was a grand-scale, patiently executed form of meat preparation, seemingly at odds with the stereotypical Japanese perception of American impulsiveness. "This cut is brisket," Davis explained, using tongs to lift a massive slab of meat that had been smoking for hours. "It's slow-smoked with hickory wood, over low heat, a traditional Texas barbecue method." He sliced thin pieces, revealing a pink smoke ring beneath the charred bark, and arranged them on a plate alongside what he called pulled pork. The meat was so tender it practically shredded at a touch. Akiko accepted the plate with both hands, a gesture of respect, despite being stunned by the sheer quantity. The single serving contained more meat than many Japanese families had seen in months. "Try it with the barbecue sauce," Mitchell suggested, pointing 2 bowls of a dark, viscous liquid with a rich, tangy aroma. "Kansas City style. Tomato-based, with molasses and spices." Akiko first tasted the brisket without the sauce, wanting to savor the unadulterated flavor of the meat itself. The taste was unlike anything she had ever experienced. A profound smokiness permeated every fiber, its melt-in-your-mouth tenderness requiring no chewing. A richness that spoke of prolonged, patient, temperature-controlled cooking. She involuntarily closed her eyes. When she reopened them, she found Sachiko watching her with a mixture of hunger and apprehension. "How does it taste?" Sachiko asked, in Japanese. "Extraordinary," Akiko admitted, taking another bite. "The smoking process creates an unprecedented flavor. It is nothing like our grilled fish. It is entirely different. Within minutes, all 43 Japanese POS began to partake in the American barbecue, each expressing varying degrees of astonishment. They conversed rapidly in Japanese, exchanging observations on the flavors, textures, and the astonishing generosity of such abundant meat offered to enemy prisoners. "This pulled pork is excellent," observed Noriko Sato, a former naval nurse who had rarely eaten pork even before the war. "How do they make it so tender?" "Long, slow cooking," Davis explained, having patiently listened to their Japanese conversations, despite not understanding the specifics. "The pork shoulder is smoked at low temperatures for 12 to 14 hours. The smoke and the prolonged heat break down the tough meat until it becomes incredibly soft." 12 hours. Sachiko's voice was filled with disbelief. They cook meat for 12 hours just for barbecue. "Yes. It's not about speed. It's about flavor and tradition. Americans have cooked this way for generations." As the evening deepened, Akiko found herself analyzing the barbecue with the same intensity she once applied to military intelligence. This was no crude outdoor cooking. It was a complex craft, demanding patience, precise temperature control, careful wood selection, and a profound understanding of how smoke and heat transform meat. Lieutenant Tanaka approached Akiko quietly. "May I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "As you taste this food, this abundance, this mastery of technique, does it change your perception of those who defeated us?" Akiko pondered the question, watching the American staff laughing easily, generously hosting their captives. "Yes," she finally conceded. "It changes everything." The barbecue celebration extended well into the night, as the American staff proudly demonstrated their culinary methods. Akiko began to grasp that this outdoor feast represented far more than just food. It was a profound cultural expression, a community ritual, and tangible evidence of American affluence, directly contradicting the Japanese propaganda that portrayed the enemy as weak and unsophisticated. "Sergeant Davis," she addressed the barbecue master in her carefully rehearsed English. "May I ask about your cooking method?" "In Japan, we quickly grilled thin slices of meat over high heat. This low and slow smoking is very different." Davis' face immediately lit up with the enthusiasm of someone asked about their passion. "Barbecue is all about patience and smoke flavor. You can't rush it. The low temperature, around 225 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, allows the smoke to deeply penetrate the meat, while the collagen slowly breaks down. If you rush it with high heat, the meat becomes tough and flavorless. But 12 hours of cooking requires a great deal of fuel and constant attention," Akiko observed. "It's all worth it for the result," Davis responded, adjusting a grill vent to control the airflow. "Barbecue's a weekend tradition for American families. We gather friends and relatives, cook all day, and share good food together. It's not just about the meal. It's how we build community." This concept captivated Akiko. In Japan, elaborate food preparation was reserved for special occasions or professional restaurants. The idea of ordinary families spending an entire day cooking meat as a social ritual hinted at a relationship with food and community fundamentally different from the Japanese way. "In my country," she said cautiously, "such cooking would be considered wasteful. The fuel, the time, the quantity of meat, all would be seen as excessive luxury." "Perhaps before the war, that was true," Davis conceded. "But in America, we can cook this way because our agricultural and industrial systems create abundance. If resources are plentiful and the community benefits from the gathering, then it isn't wasteful." Over the next hour, Akiko and several other posts received an informal lesson in barbecue. Davis showed them different types of wood. Hickory for a rich, smoky flavor. Applewood for sweetness. Mesquite for intense smokiness. He explained the Texas crutch, wrapping meat in foil during cooking, demonstrated how to maintain consistent temperatures, and described the regional variations of American barbecue styles. "Texas is known for brisket," he elaborated, "North Carolina for vinegar-based pulled pork, Kansas City for its wide variety and thick, sweet sauces, Memphis for dry rubbed ribs. Each region has traditions passed down through generations." "So many regional styles," Sachiko observed. "In Japan, We also have regional culinary differences, but I never imagined America possessed such a complex system of cooking. This comment reflected a broader realization spreading through the group of post. Japanese propaganda had consistently depicted Americans as culturally inferior, lacking the sophistication and tradition that defined Japanese civilization. Yet, the evidence before them demonstrated a culinary artistry, developed over centuries, with regional variations that mirrored its geographical and cultural diversity. Lieutenant Yamada Nurse Yuki Tanaka called out, having been inspecting the accompanying side dishes, "You should see these preparations. Coleslaw, potato salad, baked beans. Each require specific techniques and recipes passed down through generations." Akiko moved to the side dish table, carefully studying the preparations, which exhibited a level of detailed craftsmanship she had never anticipated finding in supposedly crude American cuisine. The coleslaw possessed a perfectly balanced vinegar-to-oil ratio. The potato salad offered layers of flavor, while the baked beans, slow-simmered with bacon and molasses, rivaled the complexity of Japanese nimona stews. "This isn't primitive cooking," Yuki murmured. "This is refined cooking, which we dismissed because it looked different from our methods." That evening, as the posts returned to their barracks, their conversations no longer centered on the humiliation of imprisonment but on the revelations about American culture that the barbecue had unveiled. For Akiko, the experience was particularly unsettling as it challenged her role as an intelligence officer. If her understanding of American cuisine was so thoroughly mistaken, how much else had Japanese intelligence misunderstood about their adversary? "We thought they were barbarians," Sachiko remarked, before lights out. "But they cook meat for 12 hours with skills passed down through generations. That is not barbarism. That is a craftsmanship we fail to recognize in our opponent." Akiko lay on her comfortable bunk, replaying the day's events, the abundance of meat, the patience of the smoking technique, the communal aspect of outdoor cooking, all suggested a society far more sophisticated and generous than Japanese propaganda had ever acknowledged. Tomorrow she resolved she would ask Sergeant Davis if she could learn more about American barbecue methods for understanding the enemy's culture had suddenly become more vital than upholding the prejudices that had led Japan to underestimate its adversary. 3 days after the barbecue celebration, Akiko was assigned to the camp kitchen, where American chefs were instructing posts in food preparation as part of a broader cultural education program. To her surprise, Sergeant Davis was also there, having volunteered to conduct specialized barbecue workshops for interested Japanese prisoners. "Miss Yamada," he greeted her warmly. "Corporal Mitchell said you were curious about American barbecue techniques. I'd be delighted to teach anyone interested in culinary traditions." Over the next 2 weeks, what began as simple cooking lessons evolved into a comprehensive education on American food culture, its agricultural systems, and the economic foundations that enabled such barbecue abundance. Davis proved to be a patient instructor, understanding that his students required not just recipes but vital contextual knowledge. "American barbecue exists because we have an incredibly efficient cattle and hog industry," he explained during one session, gesturing as if outlining an agricultural organizational chart of the U.S. Ranchers in Texas and the Midwest raise millions of livestock. Railways and refrigerated transport move meat across the country. Packing plants in Chicago process animals with efficiency. This entire system creates a bounty of meat, making barbecue accessible to the average family. Akiko absorbed these details with the same focus she had once applied to military intelligence, recognizing that understanding the American food system revealed a deeper truth about the industrial capacity that had overwhelmed Japan. If Americans could establish such a complex system for beef and pork distribution, their military logistics operations would inevitably possess similar efficiency. In Japan, she ventured during one class, meat is a scarce luxury. Before the war, most families relied on fish for protein. Beef and pork were expensive, reserved only for special occasions. The idea of American homes regularly cooking such vast quantities of meat seemed impossible. Not impossible, Davis gently corrected, just a different economic system. America invested in agricultural efficiency, cultivating superior livestock, improving feed production, and mechanizing slaughter and processing. We created abundance through systematic industrial development. This lesson transcended barbecue, touching on fundamental questions of how societies organize resources, prioritize investments, and distribute prosperity. The Americans had built systems that made meat affordable enough for weekend celebrations. Japan, by contrast, had prioritized military expansion over civilian prosperity. This stark comparison offered a compelling explanation for why the war had ended as it did. Could Japanese families learn barbecue? Sachiko asked, having enthusiastically joined the cooking lessons. After the war, when resources are available again. Why not? Davis replied. Barbecue techniques aren't secret, nor are they particularly difficult. They simply require patience, practice, and meat. If Japan rebuilds its agricultural and food distribution systems, families could absolutely develop their own barbecue traditions. This possibility ignited Akiko's interest. She envisioned post-war Japan adopting American barbecue methods while simultaneously adapting them to Japanese ingredients and aesthetic preferences. We could try smoke and fish, she suggested. Japan has abundant seafood. Applying barbecue techniques to salmon or mackerel might create interesting fusion dishes. Davis's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's brilliant. I'd never thought of low and slow smoking for fish, but there's no reason it wouldn't work. The smoky flavors would pair perfectly with fatty fish. This conversation sparked immediate experimentation. With Davis's approval, Akiko began testing barbecue techniques on fish procured from local suppliers. The results astonished everyone. Salmon, smoked for hours at low temperatures, yielded flavors that combined the sophistication of American barbecue with the revered traditions of Japanese seafood. This is truly extraordinary, Yuki announced after tasting the first batch of smoked salmon. It's like taking the American method and Japanese ingredients and creating something entirely new. That's how food culture evolves, Davis observed. Different traditions meet and create innovation. American barbecue itself is a product of combining Native American smoking techniques, culinary methods brought by enslaved Africans, and European meat preparation traditions. It has always been fusion cuisine. This historical context resonated deeply with Akiko. If American barbecue represented cultural amalgamation rather than a singular tradition, then post-war Japan might also be able to fuse American methods with Japanese sensibilities, creating something valuable from defeat. Sergeant Davis, she said thoughtfully, when we return to Japan after the war, may I have your permission to share these barbecue techniques with my family? More than just permission, Davis replied with warmth. I would be deeply honored if Japanese families adopted American barbecue methods. Food sharing can build understanding between former enemies. If teaching you to smoke fish helps build peace, that would be the best possible outcome. August 1945 brought the atomic bombings, Japan's surrender, and the end of World War II. At the Camp McCoy, the Japanese processed their defeat with complex emotions. The shame of surrender intertwined with the profound relief that the killing had finally ceased. For Akiko, the barbecue lessons had become a lifeline, offering a positive focus during a fundamental restructuring of her worldview. Miss Yamada. Lieutenant Williams summoned her to the administrative office, where she met several civilian representatives from the American occupation authorities. We are organizing cultural exchange programs for the repatriation to Japan. Your barbecue experiments have greatly impressed our staff, and we would like to discuss your interest in teaching food preparation methods as part of post-war reconstruction. The proposition surprised her. Only months ago, she had been an enemy intelligence officer. Now, Americans were inviting her to use the knowledge gained in captivity to help rebuild Japan. What would this involve? She asked cautiously. Teaching Japanese families American cooking methods, including barbecue techniques, Dr. Patterson, a civilian advisor, explained. But more importantly, it's about helping the Japanese understand American food culture so they can make informed decisions about what to adopt and how to adapt it to their own traditions. You want me to teach Japanese families to cook like Americans? No, Patterson corrected. We want you to share the techniques and let Japanese families decide how to use them. Perhaps they will embrace American barbecue. Perhaps they will create fusion dishes, much like your smoked fish experiments. Or perhaps they will simply gain a deeper appreciation for American culture. The goal is knowledge sharing, not cultural replacement. This distinction was crucial to Akiko. She had no intention of erasing Japan's culinary heritage. but she had learned invaluable lessons about patience, smoky flavors, and communal cooking that could enrich, rather than supersede, Japanese cuisine. I accept, she decided, but with one condition. I wish to document both traditional Japanese grilling methods and American barbecue techniques simultaneously. We should create resources that honor both traditions. An excellent approach, Pattison agreed. That is precisely the kind of cultural bridge building we need. Over the next month, as preparations for repatriation intensified, Akiko collaborated with Davis and other American chefs to produce comprehensive barbecue materials translated into Japanese. These guides covered everything from basic smoking techniques to regional variations, always accompanied by notes on adapting methods to Japanese ingredients and preferences. This section on fish barbecue is particularly outstanding, Davis commented, while reviewing Akiko's additions. You've taken American techniques and shown how they can be integrated with Japanese seafood. It's truly innovative. That is what you taught me, Akiko replied. Food culture evolves through fusion and adaptation. I am merely applying that lesson. Indeed, as her departure date approached, the American staff organized a farewell barbecue, a ceremony and a symbol of the transformation experienced during captivity. Japanese POWs who had once expected execution now gathered freely with American personnel, sharing food and conversation, a reality unimaginable just months prior. Lieutenant Yamada Davis approached with a wrapped package. This, for you, a set of barbecue tools and spices for your family in Japan, so you can teach them what you've learned here. Akiko bowed deeply, accepting the gift, a gesture whose significance far surpassed the culinary equipment itself. Sergeant Abbys, she said solemnly, you told me that understanding former enemies yields better outcomes than hating them. Barbecue was merely the medium for that lesson. And you taught me that the best cooking comes from respecting multiple traditions, Davis responded. Your smoked fish experiments opened up possibilities I'd never considered. That night, as Akiko packed her belongings for the journey home, she carefully wrapped the barbecue tools alongside her other treasures from captivity. These barbecue implements might raise questions from her family, who might perceive American cooking methods as unfitting for a defeated nation. Yet Akiko now understood that the strongest societies were those willing to learn from others, rather than clinging to pride and prejudice. If American-style smoked fish could bring Japanese families together for outdoor culinary celebrations, that seemed a victory worth pursuing. Not a military victory, but a human one, honoring both traditions while creating something new. As she drifted to sleep on her final night of captivity, Akiko reflected on the profound transformation of her understanding. Where she had anticipated cruelty, she had discovered generosity. Where she had perceived American cuisine as crude, she had found sophistication. What she had once dismissed as barbaric outdoor smoking, she now understood to represent patience and community values that Japanese culture could respect and adapt. Barbecue was more than just food. It was a humble teacher, a bridge between enemies, and proof that the most crucial lessons often emerge in unexpected forms imbued with the aroma of smoke and sauce, and the magnanimous spirit of those confident enough in their own culture to share it freely with former adversaries. In October 1945, a repatriation ship carried Akiko and hundreds of other former POWs back to a Japan transformed by defeat. As the devastated coastline came into view, she clutched the barbecue tools Davis had given her, wondering how to explain American culinary methods to a nation still digesting the shame of surrender. What will you do with those? Sachiko asked, pointing to the wrapped barbecue equipment. Will your family understand why you are bringing home the cooking tools of the enemy? I don't know, Akiko admitted honestly, but I learned something important in captivity, that understanding our former enemies will help us rebuild better than clinging to the hatred that led to our war. The ship docked in Yokohama, where the American occupation forces had established a processing center for returning POWs. To Akiko's surprise, she was immediately contacted by the occupation authorities, who had received recommendations about her food education work from Camp McCoy. Miss Yamada, Captain Morrison stated through an interpreter, we are establishing cultural exchange programs to help Japanese civilians understand American society. Your unique experience, a Japanese officer learning American barbecue, makes you invaluable to these efforts. Would you be willing to teach cooking classes in Tokyo? This offer meant postponing her return to her family in Hiroshima, but it also provided purpose and an income source in a devastated economy where job opportunities were scarce. More importantly, it gave her a way to contribute to reconstruction that honored Japanese traditions while integrating lessons learned from American captivity. I will teach, she decided, but I wish to create courses that respect Japanese cuisine while introducing American techniques, not as a replacement, but as fusion and adaptation. 2 weeks later, Akiko stood before her first class in a Tokyo community center. 30 Japanese women, many of them war widows, struggling to support their families with limited resources, eager for any knowledge that could help them survive the occupation and reconstruction. Today, I will teach you American barbecue, she began in Japanese, observing ripples of skepticism among the audience. Not to replace our grilling traditions, but to show you techniques that can be adapted to Japanese ingredients. I learned these methods in a POW camp, and they changed my understanding of food preparation. She demonstrated smoking techniques using fish, salmon, mackerel, even sardines. Instead of beef, the low and slow cooking, infused with aromatic wood smoke, created flavors that seemed to bridge American and Japanese sensibilities. Her students tasted the results, their faces reflecting the same surprise Akiko had experienced at her first barbecue in Camp McCoy. "This is amazing," exclaimed Makiko, a former teacher and widow. "The smokiness enhances, rather than overwhelms, the fish's flavor. It's like combining American patience with Japanese ingredients to create something new." "Precisely," Akiko replied, delighted that her students grasped the concept of fusion. Post-war Japan does not have to choose between rejecting all things American and abandoning our own traditions. We can learn from both cultures, creating dishes that both honor our heritage and embrace useful innovation. Over the following months, Akiko's cooking classes achieved unexpected popularity. Word spread about the former POW teaching American-style smoked fish and creating fusion dishes that honor Japanese aesthetics while incorporating American techniques. The occupation authorities supported the initiative, recognizing it as a positive cultural exchange, and Japanese families appreciated the practical knowledge imparted by a teacher who understood both traditions. "You've become quite influential," Captain Morrison observed during a review meeting. "Your classes now have wait lists, and several other cities are requesting similar courses. People are hungry for knowledge that will help them rebuild," Akiko responded. "The barbecue techniques offer practical skills, but more importantly, they demonstrate that learning from former enemies does not mean abandoning Japanese identity." As 1945 concluded and Reconstruction accelerated, Akiko realized that her barbecue education had grown to signify something greater than culinary instruction. It was a cultural bridge, a testament that former adversaries could create value through mutual respect and knowledge sharing. Spring 1946 brought warmer weather, prompting Akiko to expand her program beyond Tokyo. She traveled throughout Japan, teaching barbecue techniques adapted for Japanese ingredients and sensibilities, consistently emphasizing fusion over replacement. In every city, she encountered the same pattern: initial skepticism that transformed into appreciation once people tasted the results. In Osaka, she recounted to Sachiko during a reunion in Tokyo. "Families are smoking mackerel with hickory wood and serving it with traditional Japanese pickles. In Kyoto, a restaurant owner has adapted my techniques to create incredibly popular smoked tofu." "Do the Americans approve?" Sachiko inquired, now working for the Occupation Administration, helping coordinate food distribution programs. "They are delighted," Akiko confirmed. "Captain Morrison says my program is their most successful cultural exchange initiative because it demonstrates mutual respect, not enforced cultural change." However, Akiko's growing influence also attracted criticism from Japanese conservatives who viewed the adoption of American methods as a betrayal of national identity. Anonymous letters accused her of collaborating with the enemy and tainting Japanese traditions by teaching their cooking techniques. "They don't understand," she confided to Sergeant Davis, who had been transferred to Tokyo as a food service advisor. "I have not abandoned Japanese cuisine. I am merely enriching it with techniques that complement our ingredients so well." "Some people will always resist change," Davis replied philosophically. But look at your class numbers. The restaurants adopting your methods. The families enjoying smoked fish. Actions speak louder than criticism. This encouragement sustained Akiko through difficult moments when she questioned whether her work was appropriate for a former Japanese military officer. Yet, each successful class, every innovative fusion dish, every family brought closer by outdoor cooking, reminded her that food could bridge the divides forged by war. "I've been thinking about your smoked fish techniques," Davis said during one of their consultation sessions. "What if we properly document them? Create a cookbook that combines American barbecue methods with Japanese ingredients and presentation. A cookbook that could be used all across Japan." This project consumed the next 6 months. Akiko and Davis collaborated with photographers, translators, and Japanese chefs to produce a comprehensive guide to fusion barbecue. The book presented a side-by-side comparison of American and Japanese grilling traditions, detailed how to adapt smoking techniques to Japanese ingredients, and offered recipes that honored both culinary philosophies. Cross-cultural barbecue. American techniques. Meat, Japanese ingredients. Was published in late 1946 and became unexpectedly popular among both Japanese families and American occupation personnel. It represented the very philosophy Akiko had championed, a respectful fusion that created value by combining, rather than replacing, traditions. "This book is more than just a cookbook," Captain Morrison observed at the launch event. "It's a blueprint for how former enemies can create something positive together. Every recipe is a testament that understanding and respecting different cultures yields better results than rejecting what we initially do and comprehend." As 1946 drew to a close, Akiko reflected on her remarkable journey from imprisoned intelligence officer to cultural ambassador. The barbecue that had first astonished her at Camp McCoy had become a vehicle for reconstruction, a bridge between nations, and proof that the most significant victories were those that honored both the triumphant and the defeated. "Do you ever regret it?" Sachiko asked during that New Year's celebration. "Teaching American methods instead of purely Japanese traditions." "Never," Akiko replied firmly. "I teach fusion, not replacement." Every Japanese family enjoying outdoor smoked fish is participating in cultural evolution, not cultural betrayal. This is precisely what post-war Japan needs. The wisdom to learn from others while retaining our identity. Summer of a decade after the war's conclusion, Akiko stood in her Tokyo cooking school, preparing for a special celebration that would intertwine American and Japanese culinary traditions. The school she had founded had become a premier center for fusion cooking in Japan, nurturing chefs who combined the best of both cultures to create innovative dishes that honored multiple traditions. Sensei called out one of his students, a young man named Yugi, who had never known wartime deprivation. "The grills are ready. Shall we prepare the American brisket and your signature smoked salmon?" "Both," Akiko confirmed. Today's event celebrates how far we have come, from enemies who could not imagine respecting each other's food, to partners who collaborate to create cuisine that transcends national borders. This celebration marked the school's 10th anniversary and drew guests from across Japan and the United States. Among them were former POWs who had attended that first barbecue at Camp McCoy, American occupation personnel who had supported the early cultural exchange programs, Japanese chefs who had built careers around fusion cuisine, and Sergeant Davis, now retired and living in Tokyo as a culinary consultant. "Miss Yamada, or should I say Professor Yamada?" Davis greeted her warmly. "What you've built here astounds me. When I taught you the basics of barbecue in Wisconsin, I never imagined it would evolve into this." "You planted the seeds," Akiko replied humbly. "I merely helped them grow in Japanese soil." As the afternoon progressed, demonstrations showcased how thoroughly fusion cuisine had developed. Students prepared American brisket with traditional Japanese seasonings. They smoked salmon with applewood and served it alongside sushi rice. They crafted barbecue sauces infused with miso and sake. Each dish represented a creative dialogue between two cultures that had learned to respect, rather than reject, each other. "The students don't see this as American food or Japanese food," Akiko explained to the assembled guests. They see it as cooking a thoughtful combination of techniques and ingredients to create delicious food. National borders are less important than quality and innovation. In her keynote address, Akiko reflected on the personal journey that had transformed her from a scornful prisoner of war into a renowned culinary educator. 10 years ago, I regarded American barbecue as barbaric, she confessed. I dismissed outdoor smoked meats as crude because they looked different from the Japanese grilling methods I'd always known. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces representing two nations. When I first tasted properly smoked brisket at Camp McCoy, I understood that prejudice is a terrible foundation for judgment. The primitive technique I had disdained was, in fact, a complex art developed over generations. This lesson extended far beyond food. It reshaped my understanding of the society that defeated us. Americans did not win solely through military might, she continued. They won because their society had built systems, agricultural, industrial, cultural, that created an affluence the enemy could not match. Barbecue was evidence of this prosperity, and an embodiment of values that prioritized community, patience, and generous sharing, even with former adversaries. She gestured towards the grills, where beef, pork, and fish smoked side by side. Today, these flavors represent more than just fusion cuisine. They represent the possibility that former adversaries can create value together. That understanding and respecting different traditions yields better results than clinging to prejudice and hatred, and that dreams can be shared. As evening descended, guests savored the fruits of a decade of culinary innovation. Akiko found herself conversing with Davis, discussing how far both nations had come since those initial, uncertain barbecue lessons. "Do you remember when I suggested smoking fish instead of beef?" she asked. "The best idea ever," Davis replied with a smile. "You took American techniques and showed how they could honor Japanese ingredients. That's true cultural exchange, not one side imposing on the other, but both creating something new together." After the celebration concluded, guests departed. Melting into the vibrant Tokyo night, Akiko reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her here. A POW who had once scorned enemy food had become a teacher of culinary fusion. An intelligence officer who had analyzed the enemy's weaknesses had learned that the strongest societies were those confident enough to generously share knowledge. Sergeant Davis's gift of barbecue tools from a decade ago still held a place of honor in our teaching kitchen, no longer an American implement in Japanese hands, but a symbol of the bridges that could be built when former enemies chose understanding over continued animosity. "Let's do it with fish," she had suggested in that initial experimental lesson at Camp McCoy. That simple idea had blossomed into a movement, a philosophy, and ultimately, a career that demonstrated how food could heal the wounds of war. As she locked up her school for the night, Akiko mused that the most significant victories she had experienced were not won on any battlefield, but in the moment she put aside her prejudices long enough to taste American barbecue, recognizing that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, even from the enemy's grill. Patiently smoking meat with a devotion that deserved respect, not ridicule. The smoke rising from those grills, American and Japanese, beef and fees, tradition and innovation, represented the best possible outcome of conflict. Former adversaries creating deliciousness together,